Thank you very much for that introduction. And thank you, I remember your mother, and she never said I was leaving the children to come from the center for party school. But thank you for that. Party President, Comrade Mark Golden, Comrade Sandra Golden, Comrade Beverly Manley Duncan, my comrade and sister Bev, President of the PNP's Women Movement, Comrade Sutherland, all other comrades, Comrade Derek Kelly, every time I come to Montego Bay, St. James, second question I ask is, how is Derek? Because Comrade Kelly and myself go back a long way. And he was reminding me of the meetings we had in Jamaica House, where Prime Minister Manley, before some meetings, would call a team of about 4 or 5 of us, who he considered quote-unquote on the left, to run a set of ideas by us before he went into the bigger meeting with people, just to get our feedback. Comrade Kenya, it really is a pleasure to see you. One love from you. I want to thank all the comrades here who are here tonight, and to thank Comrade Joyce for inviting me to say a few remarks. I want to begin those remarks by making a tribute to Comrade Sister Bev. Under her leadership, the PNP's women's movement was the progressive heartbeat, along with the PNP-YO, of the People's National Party. Both the YO and the women's movement were the political conscience of the People's National Party. Some of the most progressive policies of the party were pushed by the women's movement and the YO. The women's movement was both a set of activists, set of advocates, some of the hardest political workers of the party. And we have to understand that some of the fundamental challenges and reforms of the PNP was because of them. In other words, that we have to understand that the position of women in Jamaica, and therefore their advocacy from their position, meant that the party had to do certain things. So the demands of women were central and still are central to any progressive movement and to any progressive political party that want to have a progressive society. So I want to pay tribute to Sister Bev, Comrade Sister Bev, for leading that movement. I want to pay a second tribute, and this is history now, to her and Dr. Duncan. In 1981, I was a fired journalist from Jamaica Broadcasting Corporation. A man called Edward Siano and another man called Bruce Golden, I declared in a mass meeting that Tony Bogues will never work again in Jamaica. And when they won the election in 1980, by December 1980, I received my letter of dismissal and was told I could not even come to JBC to pack my box. What then happened was that a group of us, some other people were fired, John Maxwell, Brian Weeks, and Colin Campbell later on, and Hope Dunn and so on. What happened was that a group of us then having to make a living, used to go to the press club at 9 Surbiton Road. None of us had typewriters at home. So we used to go to Surbiton Road and Press Association that collected a few old typewriters, and we would then type up stories and we would try and sell them abroad. That's how some of us were making a small living at that time. At about 11 o'clock one night, Comrade Sister Bev and Comrade Duncan came to the press club. And they began to engage me in particular in a conversation. And we talked from 11 o'clock that night till 5 a.m. in the morning. And the heart of the conversation was this. We, in this defeat, are trying to rebuild the People's National Party. We are trying to make the People's National Party a mass democratic party. Would you come and join us? I was about to go to the university to go and do my PhD. But I thought this was going to be a much more exciting endeavor than studying for my PhD. So immediately I said yes, much to the chagrin of my then wife. When I came home at 6 o'clock, where are you coming from? I said, you wouldn't believe it, but I was talking to Dorothy and DK. Okay. And what are you all going to do? I think we're going to try and change Jamaica again by having a mass democratic party. And I then joined the PNP Secretariat with intermittent pay. In the Secretariat, first as a researcher, then working with Sister Bell on the Rising Sun newspaper, out of what was then the Women's Movement's office at 89 Holdup Road. And after a couple of months, she and Comrade Duncan came to me and said, would you be political education secretary? Beverly will be the chair. She won't do much, but you are going to be the person to run this. We need somebody who has the party experience like her to be the chair, but you run the thing as the secretary, out of the secretariat, as the political education secretary. And between 1982 and 1992, even when I was at Jamaica House, from 89, that is what I did. And part of that running of the political education was the establishment of the Vernon Arnett Party School right throughout the country. And I want to, at this moment, because I'm in St. James, pay tribute to another comrade sister who's late, who's departed, but who to me represented the essence of the politically progressive activity of ordinary black Jamaican woman, Comrade Maria Allen. And who taught me a great deal about St. James, because the way these people work at the Secretariat at those days, Comrade Duncan and Comrade Manley, was that them just said, okay, you're going to be in charge of Region 6 as well. And I said, I don't know, you're going to be in charge. And so I had to come and spend time with Comrade Maria Allen, who's taught me everything that I knew, with lots of meetings in the NW office about Region 6, particularly St. James and Westmoreland. And what I always say, comrades, is that there are two things that educated me as a person. One was when I was the organizer for the Sugar Workers Cooperative Council, living in a place called Townhead in Westmoreland, and then seeing and organizing sugar workers and understanding how driving around, looking at the houses that were built from the 19th century and seeing that sugar workers were living in those houses and learning from them in the fields about their lives. And the second school that I went to was the PNP school. that running the political education program that took me right across this country into every nook and cranny of this country. As I was saying to my sister one day when we were driving, and she said, "Where are you going? How do you know this place?" I said, "I don't know the road, but I know every constituency, so I know what to do in every single constituency and how to get out of various constituencies." And so those two things I want to say basically educated me about Jamaica and Jamaican people, not the University of the West Indies. And I will want to say that progressive politics under the PNP is an education for those who want to be educated. Because the PNP, connected deeply to the aspirations of the Jamaican people, will teach you about those aspirations in ways that you will not learn anywhere else. Let me think a little bit about Comrade Manley. I want to suggest to you, comrades, that in the 20th century, that there are 5 political leaders of profound world significance. They are Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, Nelson Mandela of South Africa, Fidel Castro of Cuba, no matter what people say, who led the Cuban Revolution in '59, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, and Michael Manley of Jamaica. And of all the 5 of them, I have sometimes great difficulty saying who is the top. But I think there is no doubt that Michael Manley was a world leader. And I think that we must in Jamaica begin to understand that. Begin to understand how Michael Manley's politics and advocacy to change the world and to change Jamaica within that world that he wanted to change. Not just put Jamaica on the map, put himself on the map, but put black people on the map in a different way. Why would I say this Michael and that 5? Firstly, is advocacy of the new international economic order. Very simply, we became, in 1940, there was a saying that said the sun never set on the British Empire. Colonialism ruled the roost for 300-400 years. And here you are after 1945, a whole host of countries becoming politically independent. Beginning with India in 47, and then Ghana in 1957, and after that, Indonesia in 58, and then followed by Jamaica, etc., countries in the Caribbean. But the end of colonialism, formal colonialism, did not mean economic independence. The same old colonial system ran the world. And so what happened was that people like Michael and Julius and so on began to think about, okay, how do we now, having gotten political independence, how do we construct that society that is equal, but not just equal, because the heart of colonialism is inequality, but how do we construct a society that is economically powerful, that can give our people an economic chance? And so that Michael and Julius Nyerere, and all the research I've done and all the conversations I've had with him when I worked with him, tells me this. They decided that what they had to do was to change the world. But before they could change the world, they had to change the non-aligned movement. Because when you look at the non-aligned movement, it was simply a political movement. And rightly so. And always ended in the end with something that was called for the ending of apartheid. Look at their demands, look at their conferences, that's what they ended with. But Michael and Mary and Julius formed what I call a tag team, and began to say that you had to now think about economics. And when they looked at the world, they said that the world was still dominated by the colonial powers. And those of you might remember that what he used to talk about was the tractor. That how you have to have the tractor to do with agriculture. But the importation of the tractor, and then you sell the agricultural commodity, you couldn't pay for the tractor.
Oh, up to this day.
And he used to call it unequal terms. Unequal terms of trade. Right? That's how he used to explain it. And then so that what he was saying here in Julius was that can't work. And so what had to happen was that the world economic structures had to change so that our commodities could be sold at the price we wanted it to be sold. Because the prices of our commodities were set in a way, this way. We grew it, whether it was cocoa in Ghana or sugar in Jamaica in Westmoreland, but the prices were set in the stock markets and the stock and the exchanges in Chicago, in London, in New York. They set the prices. And so that therefore, he says, that has to change. The other thing that makes him so important, I think, is that Monday had a project of decolonization. And it is really important, I think, to understand this. It is important to understand it because we got constitutional independence, but we were never decolonized. We were never decolonized. And when I hear the propaganda that the Michael Manley and the PNP mash up the sentence, country sentence, I laugh and then I get vexed. Because I laugh because it's not true. But I get vexed because that untruth is almost on the verge of becoming a truth.
Yeah.
It's like fake news now becoming real news. Because you have to ask who mashed up the country. The laws that he made, pushed on by the PNP women's movement and the YO, that mashed up the country. To take domestic workers and give them a minimum wage, that mash up the country. To change the masters and servants' laws, to say no bastard to pay them more, that mash up the country. To build NHT, that mash up the country. To develop Sugar Workers Cooperative Council, that mash up the country. Who mash up the country? That's the question that we have to ask. And we have to ask ourselves that question because we have to push back on a narrative which has become very popular that says that Michael and PNP mash up the country. Because what decolonization meant, comrades, that PNP decided in 1972, borrowing Delroy Wilson's music, better must come. And that better must come was about what? Changing the status of women, changing the status of poor people, and creating a society in which, as Beverly Comrade Sister Bev says, we became somebody. And it is not just we who become somebody, it's that the black persons became somebody. The slogan when I was in high school, or the summary, or the kind of thing that people have in high school, when I was in high school before I went to university in the late 70s, was this: if you're black, stay back. If you're brown, stick around. And if you're white, you're all right. Nobody could repeat that slogan after 1980 and get away with it. Why? Because Michael changed, like the People's National Parties and the policies of decolonization radically transformed that. What I think we have to understand is that the confidence of some of us as black people that we have in Jamaica did not just spring out of the air. It actually comes from a long history. And part of that history that goes back to our struggle against slavery, part of that history is the history of that the PNP was involved in 1972 to 1980. At the heart of the colonial project, colonialism, I've always said, is the oppression of women. At the heart of it. And in our situation, it was the oppression of black women. And you have a situation where in the 19th century, we talk about Trenchtown and Jonestown and so on. But if you trace the histories of those pens, that then became towns and so on, it is this. Young black girls leaving rural areas, 14, 15, 16 years old, to come to town to find work. And where did they find the work? In middle-class houses. And if you look at the architecture of middle-class houses, I was born in one, I'm from the middle class. From middle class. If you look in the architecture of those houses, all those houses have something they call the helpers' quarters. And in that helpers' quarters, sexual abuse took place. And in that helpers' quarters, women were treated, those young ladies of the country were treated horribly. Therefore, by doing minimum wage, by doing a submonetization, what I call a submonetization program, by doing those kind of programs, it mashed down those kind of relations. That is why some people were upset about Jamaica. Some people were upset about Jamaica. Why? Because the rule that they have had over Jamaican ordinary poor people for hundreds of years was challenged. And if you challenge something, then you are going to get resistance. And I just want to say to my good comrade and party leader, that this is something that we all need to remember. Michael himself never thought that he would challenge so much. He thought that, I went to it's for the good.
Makes sense.
How this decent, to make life decent for people. That must be great. What is the problem? But the way the class and color things work in Jamaica is that it is so strong and so powerful and has so much hundreds of years that when you mash corn, then corn is going to try and come. Those who corn you mash is going to try and come back at you. And that's what you have to ask, therefore, why did Jamaica mash up? And who mashed up? Who mashed up Jamaica? It is because I would want to argue that women are at the bottom of the bottom. And I argue that those who are at the bottom of the bottom have all the rights that they want to have and need to have to fight for what they need to fight for. Michael Manu, why did he do all of this? He did all of this because he believed deeply in a just society. And at the heart of a just society, for Comrade Manley, were three things. Self-reliance, and I hear one comrade say, eat what you grow, etc.
Yes.
Equality and democracy. But it wasn't not just those three things, self-reliance, equality, and democracy. It was also, and this is one of the things that we don't get about Michael, I think, because it's sometimes shrouded in our politics, is that Michael was for the liberation of the human being.
Yes.
And I think ordinary people pick that up. it up, because when you go with him on a meetings and you didn't walk about coming past president, that's not happening. And you see how people react, and when you see the relationship between him and others, you realize that they are seeing something that even you are not seeing. And it is only when I read back some of those speeches and reflect back in my mind in some of those meetings that I begin to realize that what they were picking up was something that he was for the liberation of persons. So he was for equal pay, equal work, all those things. But he was for the liberation for persons, and for that liberation was about the development capacities of the individual in every single way.
Yes.
That you had the capacity. Gala said, Michael and Bev told her how to sing, and it was Marky G who did, current president, past president, who did the first recording. Right? But the thing that what the Comrade Van was for was that you had the capacity to do everything that you wanted to do. You just needed the opportunity to do it. And the role of the People's National Party was to do what? Was to create that opportunity to do it. For every individual to do it. It was, in my view, politics at its highest. That's what politics at its highest is. Politics at its highest is not about resource allocation. You need that. It's not about bottle work. Sometimes you need that. But at its highest level of politics is about creating a society that allows each individual to do what? To find him or herself and to expand his or herself capacity for him or herself and his family or her family. That's the heart of politics. The creation of opportunity and the creation of a justice system that allows people, if something goes wrong, to feel that they can get amends. Comrades, Michael Manley, in my view, one of the most seminal speeches ever made in the Caribbean. I think there are, and I've argued and said there are 3 seminal speeches, political speeches in the Caribbean. Fidel Castro's History That Absolved Me, Eric Williams' Master Day Done, and Michael Manley's We Are Not For Sale. And I was trying to think about where we are today. And this idea of a regime in the North in which everything is resolved by extraction. Nothing about human beings. So you want to deal with Gaza, you want to turn it into a Riviera. Nothing about the 2 million people who were displaced. You want to deal with Ukraine, you talk about the rare minerals under the earth, rather than the thousands of people who have died in that war. So everything is up for sale. So I was thinking, what can I say? They're not for sale. And this is what Michael says at the end of that speech. 76 at the party conference. We know where we're going. We are working towards the day when there will be no more masters and no more servants, but only to get one together in the Lord. And we are learning now to go not on our knees, but true, sovereign, human, dignified beings, because we know where we are going. And then he ends, in the name of every victim that ever lived, in the name of every martyr that ever died, we will not fail, we will overcome. This is the kind of person that led this party. This is the mission that was outlined to us in 76. This is where we are in a position in the world where, quite frankly, to be very frank, I never thought I would see we go back to this in certain ways. But we're back there and back with a vengeance. And it is therefore important for those of us who know a little bit of the history for us to call on people to reflect on that, but to reflect on it in a way that let us know that today is different from yesterday, okay? But that at the same time, that we have to think through what he says, that no more masters, no more servants. Everybody being having dignity as a human being. We are in that struggle now, and the time has come.
Yes.
Time has come for us to begin anew that particular struggle. Tactics may be different because the time is different. But the objective of creating a society where every single person has the capacity to achieve what he or she wants as a person and as an individual is something that's a legacy that Comrade Manley has left us. And it is something that is a legacy we all have to carry on our shoulders forward to save Jamaica. One love and one heart, comrades, and thank you.